All right, y'all, thank you so much for joining me. Today we are recording this conversation for the Breaking the Barriers podcast. Breaking the Barriers, there we go. And we're going to talk about our experience as LGBTQ plus people living in Nevada County. I want to welcome you all and thank you for giving your time to this, especially Maddox on your lunch break. And of course to our listeners as well, we're excited to have you join in the conversation. My name is Megan Wells. My pronouns are they, she. I'm a board member of Nevada County Pride, which is a local 501c3 organization focused on uplifting and enlivening the lived experience of the LGBTQ plus community in Nevada County and beyond. I identify as a queer, white, cisgender woman, and I grew up in Placer and Nevada counties and then lived in the Bay Area and Denver for the next 20 years and have now returned to my roots to enjoy my next phase here. So I'm relearning Nevada County as a grown-up. And I'm really happy to be back in this beloved place on stolen Nisenan land. I've worked in human resources and employee advocacy for 15 plus years, and now I work as a death doula and an end-of-life advocate. And I also work alongside my trans non-binary partner who runs river and route photography, so I get to do really fun stuff as well. I want to give our audience an opportunity to get to know you all a little bit. So any one of you can start. I'd love for you to share your name and pronouns and a little bit about how you identify, and anything else that you feel is vital to share about yourself. And Maddox, would you like to start?
Sure, absolutely. So, hello, my name is Maddox Eckerling. I use they, he pronouns, and I am a queer Jewish person living here in Nevada County. I'm currently studying sociology at San Francisco State, and do a lot of work in the LGBTQ and mental health spaces, doing activism and speaking. I was born and raised here in Nevada County, graduated in 2023 from Godoti Early College High School, and I'm now just in the next, phase of life in college and figuring out where things will go from there.
Awesome.
I'm Sam. I use they them pronouns. I am aroace bisexual. I have very intense ADHD, and I am currently a senior at Godoti Early College High School.
All right. I am Steven. I use he, him pronouns. I am a 26-year-old transgender man. To start, the podcast listeners can't see this, but this is my service dog Creature. He, they pronouns, as we can all see on the pronoun pin here. He's just sort of chewing on something on the stage. And as for me, that's pretty much me right there. I've volunteered and worked in animal rescue at the local animal shelter Sammy's Friends for quite some years, fostering. Now I am pretty much a full-time dog sitter. I take breaks for surgeries, which I think I'm on either my 6th or 7th now, as part of my gender alignment adventure, and not quite so ambitious as my fellows here, but we all make do. I also grew up here in Nevada County. I've lived in the same house my whole life, so it's a very interesting experience growing up in a very white area. But we'll definitely get into that in the conversation.
Absolutely. And Stephen, I would say that anyone who's on a gender alignment journey is doing some serious work. So I hope you give yourself plenty of credit for that.
Very affirming.
A quick note before we move into the meat of our conversation. I just want to note that I'm going to use the terms LGBTQ plus and queer synonymously in this conversation. I've chatted with our guests and we all feel safe with that usage. That may or may not apply for other folks, but we've decided that's okay, and I trip over LGBTQ plus every time. So thank you for rolling with that. Okay, so just to kick us off, I would love to hear from any of you and all of you how you would describe the experience of growing up and living as a queer individual in Nevada County. What do you think is unique about it? What would you share with folks who aren't having that lived experience? Anyone feel called to share?
I can share. So I originally grew up in Penn Valley, spent the first 10 years of my life down in Penn Valley, And then when my parents divorced, they both moved up to Grass Valley. And so I moved up to Grass Valley for high school. And, it's very interesting because from Penn Valley, it's very small, very conservative, very white. And I spent some time living in Lake Wildwood, which is sort of like a retirement community. So there's a lot of, wealthy retired folk from the Bay Area. And then we moved on to a ranch out behind a hardware store. And it was really, quite an experience. We raised goats and sheep and pigs, and it was so much fun. We had 5 acres. We all loved that property. But the school was really interesting because no one was out. It wasn't a thing that we spoke about, wasn't an experience that people had. I started to question my own sexuality when I was in 7th grade. And I was actually the other day looking back at some yearbook photos, and I was like, holy cow, I had such a crush on that one, and such a crush on that one, and such a crush on that one. I was like, holy cow. There were a lot of attractive people back in my school. But it was just really interesting because it was like not something that was spoken about, never came out to anyone down there. I was actually found out that I was outed after I left, which was really interesting. I went back a year later to help out with the play that they put on every year, and I had found that everyone knew, and I was like, how do you all know this? I barely know this.
Wow, interesting.
And so that was a really interesting experience. And then, going up to Grass Valley, and, Godoti is a very opening, welcoming, lovely school. And so I was able to come out there, be myself there. We had a thriving GSA club, thriving queer population at school. And so that was a very beautiful community to be in. But then my mom lives like downtown Grass Valley, and so I'd then get home from school and I'd walk downtown, and we'd just walk downtown because it's fun, it's the thing to do, and you just see the Proud Boys eating lunch with their families just openly, just because it was their monthly get together in downtown. And it was like, all right, how about I take a step back and go back to my mom's house and do some homework, right? Because it's like, I'm not safe there. And then later I ended up finding Nevada City, because we never really went there. And so towards my junior and senior year, when I had a car and some freedom, I started going to Nevada City a lot more and met some amazing people there, because that's such a more welcoming city for us to be in compared to Grass Valley, and especially Penn Valley.
Isn't that wild? Just a few miles up the road, it's such degrees of difference for
Yeah,
wild. Anyone else want to answer that question? That was a lovely synopsis. Maddox, I'll say I'm a bit your senior, all of you here, but I certainly was not out in high school. I didn't even have the context for that. There was no one was out. No one was even having the conversation. I actually went to Colfax High School. I was too intimidated by Nevada Union, and so didn't want to handle a school of that size. And I think a part of my queer experience as a younger person was like knowing that there were folks who were queer, and being really drawn to them. My PE teacher being one of them, who I still adore, but having no context for it, not even having the language to approach a conversation or identify for myself why I might have been drawn to people. So I'm so happy to hear that is evolving, especially in schools like Godoti, where there is really, like you said, a thriving GSA, and hopefully like staff and students who are supporting those conversations. That's awesome to hear. You also really, Maddox, spoke to some of the rural experience. There's a lot of farm animals in this life, and I want to talk about that because I was thinking about how. Not about farm animals specifically. Don't worry. We're not going to go deep on that. But the media, portrays this queer experience that tends to be pretty urban, like city life, a celebrated life, being out and safe and fabulous. And there's sparks of that here for sure. But of course, there are millions of us who are building our lives in more rural settings, whether we're growing up here or we're choosing to return and find community here. And in preparing for our conversation, I found a really interesting report that was completed by the Movement Advancement Project. And in their data, they outlined specifically some of the specific factors, that impact the experience of LGBTQ plus folks living in rural areas. And I'm going to use some of their terminology because I just found it really helpful for framing my own experience. And for those listeners, I would definitely encourage you to check this out at lgbtmap.org. It was just an interesting resource. So the first idea that they touched on was the idea of increased visibility, which is the idea that a queer individual is simply more likely to stand out in a small, mostly homogenous community like ours. And I see that this could definitely lead to discriminatory behavior and also potentially to the tokenization of queer people. You might be the only queer person that someone knows, and that can be really lovely and can also be probably challenging in its own ways. So I wanted to hear from you all if you feel like you do face that kind of increased visibility as an out queer person in Nevada County, and if so, how does that show up? How do you feel that? How does that impact you?
Okay, just a little note about myself. I'm afraid that my mind will go totally blank, so I took notes on my own life, and then it's like now I'm like, oh, these are just sort of bullet points, and then I'll either read I'll either be like talking caveman or, okay, scarring visible. Okay, I'll turn that into a sentence. So yeah, I in the warm weather especially tend to just be a forest creature and go out in my neighborhood, no shirt and stuff, and I do have very visible scarring on my chest. I have very visible scarring, not for the listeners but for the audience, on my leg. And people who are in the know will know what that is, but I have yet to encounter anyone except maybe at like a PFLAG meeting, which is parents, families, friends of lesbians and gays. More often it's just like, what happened to your leg? What happened to your chest? The impact for me of that is overall actually very positive, because at this point in my life, I really don't like the term passing, but I do, heavy air quotes here for the listeners, I do pass as just a guy, except for the scarring that's visible. And so, I'll be out at a park somewhere with no shirt or just with shorts, and, people will be like, wow, what's up with that? And, depending on the context, the kind of energy I read in the other person, who else is around, where I am, I generally do, and just how much of a conversation I'm willing to have at the moment, I generally do share honestly what it is. And that visibility for me is extremely validating, because growing up being very invisible, it's like, oh, yay, people are seeing and marveling at, maybe there is some tokenization, sure, but they're still marveling at, my lived experience as a queer person. And that for me is very affirming. On the flip side, there will be kind of remarks like, I'll say, oh, these are actually mastectomy scars or something. I'm female to male transgender, and someone will be like, wow, that's amazing. Actually, I have a friend who did that. And just the subtle phrasing of who did that, little things that people don't necessarily consciously even realize. There's zero malevolence behind it, but it just goes to show how they're thinking about it, how they're framing it in their subconscious.
Stephen, can I just make sure I understand? So you're saying did that as if it was like a singular experience, or a checkbox, rather than like
a choice,
whole,
more
I
like,
see.
yeah, like the comparison I was going to make is like, if you have a friend who develops, some sort of, life-threatening condition, or let's use cancer, and then they go through chemotherapy and radiation, if you hear someone else say that they have I've been diagnosed with cancer, it's not, I have a friend who did cancer. They did that. It's like, I didn't set my feet into this willingly. Trust.
Can I ask a question about that? So I think I think that many of us encounter the moment when someone wants to start a conversation with you, and you have to make the decision of like, do I have the mental space for this? Can I play this game with this person potentially, or like do this in a way that will benefit them and benefit me? And sometimes it's really I feel like sometimes it's really a gift we can give. It's energy we can put into educating someone else. And sometimes that is not worth that. Do you find yourself, when do you find yourself, I guess, most inclined to be able to have that conversation? Like, what is it about someone's ask that makes you say, this is a safe situation, and yes, I want to take the time to connect and share?
Great question. A lot of it is admittedly just setting. Like if I was just getting ready to leave the dog park, I might just be like, oh, shark attack, or like, or I'll just say like I had surgery or something. But I mean, if I'm just hanging out and I'm, willing to have a conversation, there's plenty of time. It's almost easier to describe when I won't engage, because generally there's no right way to approach. People are generally pretty benevolent about it. And just asking out of concern or curiosity, which is all very human. Sometimes it's just I feel like it'd be an exaggeration to say if it feels unsafe, but if it just maybe feels a little off, or there's just maybe, this is such an assumption on my part about the other person, but just maybe a low likelihood that they would, I don't know. It's hard to put into words. And I mean, there are cases where, I feel like this is too close. Sorry. I'm just like paranoid. There are cases where I've just sort of let it develop out of interest. Like this one, quite older gentleman who this was when I had a previous catheter bag, which again, something the live audience can see that the listeners can't. And he leans in close and he's like, "You're a bit young for this, but do you have prostate problems?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm not going to tell him the reality. I'm going to savor this." He was telling me about his prostate problems. I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Oh, boy. It was great.
So if there's an opportunity for you to invite others into vulnerability, that's a good chance. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, and it does end up being actually a really, the times that I do choose to share, it ends up being a really awesome gift that I feel like it's a gift to me to be able to have that sort of impact just by living my life openly. It's like, cool, educating a person here, and, a lot of people, I'm really astonished at the number of people who they'll listen for a few minutes, then they'll go, "Now I have some questions," because I have, either a nephew or a granddaughter or a a neighbor friend or something, who came out as trans, and she, I just don't get, and they ask, and then they get more information and more understanding, and it's pretty magical.
I love that.
Yeah.
I definitely think that vibes are really important when having that conversation with a stranger, especially a stranger that you've never seen before. They just come up to you and they want to have a conversation. And, like you were saying, Stephen, it's something that you can't really describe. It's an in the moment thing, right? It's just like, you seem curious and we're going to start this conversation. But for me personally, I've always been very skeptical at first, right? So in these sort of like designated spaces, I'm very good at, opening up and being very vulnerable. But when I'm just out on the street and someone comes up to me, I'm always very timid at first. I'm very like, what are you doing? Why are you talking to me? Because I've had, bad experiences in the past. And so it's very much, they start talking to me and I'm like, maybe this is going to be a good conversation, and I start to invite it in, continue to assess as we go along and see what happens from there. And in terms of your original question about increased visibility, I think it's a very interesting topic in this county because of how white we are, right? The county is so white. All of us up on this stage are white presenting, and so we have a gift in that we can kind of blend into society with how we dress. We can make that choice, right? To say, hey, today I'm not feeling comfortable. Maybe I'm going to, put on something that feels more straight to me, whatever that means to you. And you can go out and kind of try and fly under the radar. A lot of people don't have that privilege. But another thing that I'll say is because of a lot of the work that I do outside, there's like times where you get recognized and you're like, whoa, you're not a safe person and you know exactly who I am, right?
Interesting.
And so because of how small the community is and because of, how quickly words spread, very hard to keep things kind of secret. And I've seen that a lot with people just like recognizing me, but also with getting outed, right? At the beginning of, I'm out now, so you can't out me at this point. But
You can't out me.
but when I was first coming out, I was outed time after time after time because
Jeez.
word just spreads,
Yeah.
right? And in this county, it just spreads. And pretty soon you walk into class and everyone's like, we know who you are. And I'm like, oh, do you now? Right? And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, okay. I guess we're doing this now. And so I very quickly I had to become very comfortable with who I am and sort of defending myself because it's like, no, this is me. If you don't like that, door's right there.
Wow. Y'all just mentioned, so much of what you both shared, what I was hearing is all of the skills that you have developed in order to be a safe, still open and loving queer person in this community. You have to know, you have to read people. You probably read every space you walk into. You have to gauge whether you think a person has any danger, and you're right. It's an unknown, tricky thing, especially, Stephen, what I heard from you is like, you are a non-judgmental person. You have such an open presence, an open heart. I imagine it's, challenging or maybe doesn't feel good for you maybe to have to kind of have that that lens on that like what am I feeling from this person? Am I feeling something that's off? And if so, like, sorry, I actually have to close down to you because something's telling me, my intuition is telling me something's not safe. That's so much just emotional labor that you all are referencing that we have to do in order to, okay, do I feel like I'm going into a space where it's going to be I need to dress a certain way, or I'm going to just like tame myself in certain ways in order to blend in a little bit more. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about how much goes into evaluating those interactions or even just like leaving the house. What does it take? You both referenced that you don't necessarily feel in danger in spaces. But I would like to know from any and all of you who might want to share if you have had times where you feel in danger in this county. And I know anytime I see Proud Boys, something in me goes off. I'm pretty, I am cisgender. There's nothing super loud about my appearance most days. I often don't love that because I really want people to know. But I also can appreciate that I have that the safety of built-in camouflage, and and still I find myself when I see the trucks going around town with the Trump flags, when I see a lot of the hate rhetoric in our town, it just puts my guard up, and I have to evaluate: do I want to move to the other side of the street? Do I want to? I just don't want to be near it, but I also don't know if something could happen. And if I'm especially with other queer folks who might not be in the same boat, who might be trans, non-binary, have a different presentation. So I see the fringes of that, but I wonder, do any of you, have you had experiences where you have felt kind of immediate danger to yourselves in our county?
I mean, I personally don't, because I think when people see me in public, they think I'm probably a very conservative, very straight, very cis woman because I button my shirt all the way to the top and I look lost half the time. Anywhere I am, I do not do well in public spaces. I look lost. So people just give me a wide berth on the street when I'm walking, and they don't talk to me. I've never had any of the problems that either of you were talking about because people don't talk to me. They avoid me. It's really nice, actually. It's really nice. But we actually, as when you mentioned the Proud Boys and the flags, I recall during the school season, we go on like Rough and Ready to get my sister to school and then to get me to school. And we pass this house every time that has this like banner on their fence that's disguised as like this friendly pride thing, because it's in black and the text is in yellow, not yellow, rainbow. And then it says on the top, "We the people in this house believe," and then it goes like, I don't know, talking about the jab, and then like there are only 2 genders.
Oh,
It's a little bit ridiculous. I have a picture on my phone, but like I see that like every day.
Yeah.
And like I think like that thing specifically is more ridiculous than scary, but then like also on the same path to school, I see Proud Boy flags outside of people's houses, and I'm like, really? You just want to hang that in public? But like I've never been in immediate danger, but I have friends who, because I'm very privileged. I live in like Wildwood, so and I don't leave my house. I have the ability to not leave my house. But I have friends who don't have that ability, who need to get out of their houses. So they're hitting town. Is that a thing people say?
Yeah.
Hitting the town.
Hitting the town. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
we're saying it.
They're out in public, and then people will just come up to them and like call them slurs.
Yeah.
Or like they'll be having a conversation with someone, and the moment the other person realizes that they're trans or gay or whatever, they'll stop engaging in the conversation. So like I have like friends and coworkers who live those lives, and it makes me very scared for them.
Yeah.
I'm not really scared for myself
Yeah.
because, again, very privileged
Yeah.
with my presentation and my family. So
Yeah, there's all sorts of degrees of privilege and to passing, quote unquote, in certain ways in this town for sure.
Yeah, and I think for me, this is a very intersectional topic. Being that I am Jewish and queer, I wear Star of David very proudly. When I'm at school, I wear a yarmulke. When I'm in this county, I wear a hat. And that's out of pure safety because it is not safe. And I remember many times being downtown Grass Valley, and for my entire like junior and senior year, I had a rainbow bracelet and my Star of David necklace. And that was sort of like my way of, because I was still figuring out my fashion, I was figuring out how I wanted to present myself. But those were 2 things that I was like, I can do that. That's how I want to present to the world. And many times I would take off the bracelet and put it in my pocket, and I would take the necklace and put it inside my shirt. And it was like I got it like into this like smooth, like one movement thing, because I had to do it so many times.
You were like
right?
Peter Parkering, kind of.
Yes, Peter Parkering, right, exactly.
that's an adjective.
Yeah.
It's an adjective
Verb.
now, yes.
Verb. It's a verb. It's not an adjective. I'm sorry. I led you astray.
Go
It's a
back
verb.
to school.
I don't do
Get
English,
Get
so
back
I
in
don't
the
know.
classroom. Sorry.
And so, being that, multifaceted bit, for me, it's really hard to sort of, in my mind, understand, like, am I safe because of my queerness or my Jewishness right now? I'm just always not safe in one point or another because of one of them.
Yeah.
And so it's, always on edge, always what's going on next? Where am I? Who's sitting in the room? Where's the nearest exit? All of those things that you're always thinking about, just ready for whatever's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the work that goes into it. I wanted to talk about, you all have, this conversation is obviously building, and some of this I have heard about the kind of, the places where we are and are not safe. And in that report that I referenced earlier, one of the things another facet that it kind of pulled out about the interesting part about a rural LGBTQ life is that the social structures here can kind of be at odds with it. Unlike more urban settings, church still plays a large part in many people's lives in our town. And also I would say there's more folks who are, who stay in closer touch with their family of origin. And often church communities, other kind of community groups and families of origin are not safe spaces. Sam, you referenced that you have friends who don't want to be at home. And I was just thinking, damn, if you didn't have a home you were even safe in, which we know is the case for so many queer youth, especially, that you're out there. You kind of have to be out there. You have to hit the town because, maybe you don't have many places to go. And so those social structures that tend to be really common and kind of have the deep roots in our communities might be at odds with your queer experience. And so I wonder, how you would say that has impacted you. Like how has your queerness impacted your ability to find comfortable social settings, social groups that you want to be a part of and that you feel safe in? Do you feel like that's been a challenging element, or how do you do that? How do you find the places to be that feel good, where you can thrive?
Starting off, I just created them. I,
Love that.
when I was in high school, we had a GSA and a Bring Change to Mind club. Bring Change to Mind is a mental health organization. And we had both of those clubs, but they were struggling. And those were two parts of my identity that I felt very connected to at the time and still do today. And so I jumped in and became a leader in both of those clubs and, rebuilt the clubs and made them the space that I wanted. And then, I met Daniela Fernandez, and she has a bunch of different groups that she's been doing over the years. And so I've been participating in those. And it's just a matter of, finding someone that has a group and joining it or making your own. But it's definitely interesting because there's so many different cliques and small identities and little things that come into play that it's very hard to find something that truly aligns with your beliefs, with who you are, and all of your identities.
Sam or Stephen, what about you? Have you found that more challenging, or do you still feel like there's holes, I guess, in the social structures that you need to thrive?
See, I have a very unique ability to be incredibly privileged in that I kind of just stepped into those places on accident. And I've definitely had
When you were lost, walking
when I was
around.
lost,
Yeah.
I'm always lost. It's really easy. But I've definitely had I was on the Nevada County Youth Commission and the founding group of that, and that experience wasn't super awesome for me. Like, it didn't have anything to do with my queerness, but just my neurodivergence, people were put off by it, so they just didn't talk to me like I was as smart as them. So there was that. I just didn't like those people. They were all very stiff and acted like they had been bureaucrats for 70 years. Not like they were teenagers. It was very off-putting. But my friend group, I kind of just stepped into that because we're all very weird and very queer. And we were just kind of attracted to each other. I don't know what it was. We all just found each other very easily. And that's been my friend group since all through high school. And my best friend, I've been friends with her since 7th grade. And she's kind of followed me. I followed her actually to Godoti. It was the only reason I went. My parents picked it out.
Thanks, best friend.
Yeah. Sometimes. Thank you. But then I work in the public library currently, and so you're not going to find the people who would make you feel unsafe at the public library working there. So I've just been very privileged in finding my safe spaces.
Yeah. Give it up for libraries. Let's do a
literally
whole
love
other
libraries.
I love libraries.
So awesome.
Stephen, I want to ask you I think you said you're 26, is that right? So I find this so exciting to hear what Maddox and Sam are sharing. And I, as a 40-year-old, I'm still finding it. Number one, making friends as an adult, that's another podcast we could have someday with maybe people in the audience. It's just tricky. But I wonder for you, you've been out of school a bit longer. Do you feel, you may have brought connections from school. It sounds like you have maybe closer family connections, but do you find the social structures to be lacking or feel challenging as, someone in your mid-20s in Nevada County?
Yeah, kids, back in my day. I would say, adulthood and childhood are, for me specifically, I have a very unusual divide because right after I graduated high school, I was very suddenly stricken with severe chronic migraines and was housebound, disabled, mostly bedridden for years and years. And so that was this weird alternate existence. And then after that was the sort of introspective period during which I realized my identity. And after that, I reemerged into the world as, someone who was, going on that medical and social transition male. But before that, growing up, because I didn't know anything about myself being queer, and because it was never really spoken, I just didn't know about things. I didn't know who to, drift towards or away from. I I just sort of ended up becoming friends with whoever was sort of interested in me and wanted to, play with me on the playground or whatever, which turned out to be one person who back then it was called Mormon, but now Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints. One person who belonged to that, and then we drifted apart, and then I went right into a friendship with another person, same religion. And that was right during the time, that was 2008, so I was like 4th, 5th grade, and that was right when my parents were starting to talk, they're talking about the upcoming election and politics and everything, and they're starting to talk about gay marriage, this and whatever, and I'm like, oh, what does gay mean? And they're like, oh, well, that's, when two, grown-ups of the same sex get married or something. I'm like, oh, okay. And then, I processed that in the next, week or two, and I'm like, wait a minute, you mean, two, men get, anyway, I was like, it's weird. So I'm just like this 4th grade girl, whatever, but I like that idea. But, and then I would go over to my friend's house, to sleep over or something. They had their Yes on Prop 8 sign in the front yard. And I'm just like, interesting. Just, all these little things you're processing. And it didn't really, nothing came and bit me at all because I wasn't openly, and no one was able to tell that I was LGBTQ. I would get teased for being like a tomboy, but it's like, oh, thank you, whatever.
Yeah.
So after that, though, as an adult, once I realized that my gender is not what I was sort of just taking for granted, I think my very first re-entrance into society from just sitting and resting or laying in bed was I went to a Nevada County PFLAG meeting when that was still here. And then I branched out to Placer PFLAG, which there's someone here that I met there. I mean, I basically knew what I needed, and I intentionally went into those spaces. And then as I got more physically, robust, I guess, I started taking my old dog, Sadie, to dog parks, meeting people. She passed away. Now there's Creature. I'll go to dog parks. I meet people. There are dog park friends here. And dog people are obviously great people. And so I'm going in the good spaces and finding the good people. And I have developed a really awesome, supportive community of, loving people, which I think is very fortunate, and it does impress me a lot for a rural place like this. There's so many really open-minded people. Awesome.
I love that. I agree with you that there are so many open-minded people, and what I'm hearing from each of you is that, again, you're doing the work of either of being really brave. I was not, I do not think I embodied all that you are embodying at each of your relative ages, at that age, and I'm hearing that it takes going after it and a little bit of I'm going to put myself in this space and figure it out, or having that just really open heart and trying to connect and probably doing that over and over again until you do find the group that that will be your match. I applaud you for doing that, and I applaud you for helping create the spaces. I can especially hear where a lot of young people are much more, have much greater access to a queer experience through GSAs, through, I know PFLAG is no longer here, but through groups like that. I'm really grateful that those exist. I want to talk about something that we've definitely touched on, but I want to talk about microaggressions a little bit more, zoom in on that, I suppose, because I, as someone who moved back here from I was really in very queer bubbles in the Bay Area, in Denver, and most people in my bubble had moved beyond gendered language. So there was no more, hey guys, hey ladies. I was never going to receive that in that group. And though friends might have still struggled, we all do when someone transitions pronouns or goes through a name change, that takes time. That was really the only kind of hiccup that I would see regularly. I was not, the gendered greetings thing was just, we had moved past that. And moving back here to Nevada County, I was really surprised a little bit at how that is just how we greet each other. And I find that to be, well, speaking from my own experience, again, like it is not necessarily, I am a cisgender woman, but I just don't care about my gender. It's just not important to me. So to be called out with guys or ladies or anything else just feels weird. Like I promise you, that's not that interesting. And there are a lot of interesting things about me. So like, call me like, hey, death kid. That's you know, I would be into that. That's a conversation I want to have. Or you know, hey, person who volunteers a lot, tell me. I don't know, but. Yeah, for me, it's just that my gender is not important, and so I don't like being labeled by it. For my trans and non-binary partner, every time we go into the hardware store, I'm looking at you, hardware store, and get hey ladies, it is harmful. It is a cut on their skin, and those add up, as we know. And I think if that would kind of be the platform I'm on, the hill I would die on, is just like, let's move past this. But I want to hear if, again, like, do you still encounter those? Are there other microaggressions? And I want to shed light on this because, again, like, this is an opportunity for our listeners to hear from our experience what it's like to be on the other end. And again, Stephen spoke to this so beautifully. Like, we know that it's not meant with malice. We know that folks are just maybe even really warmly greeting you. There's nothing worse than a really warm conversation followed by, have a beautiful day, ladies. Like, oh, we've just connected. I've just felt I felt the humanity between us, and then you hey ladies to me.
Where you just like hate you down with a bush.
Yeah, it's just like, it's like a hit on the back on the way out of the conversation. And so I think that I want people to be able to hear that. And I wonder if there are other microaggressions that you want to shed light on to any listeners that might learn something from this.
I actually have a story.
Tell it, Sam. Tell it.
Freshman year, right? It's like we're introducing each other. We're all getting to know each other in Phoenix, which is like this classic Adoti where you're supposed to learn things. You don't, but you're supposed to. Max is right. Occasionally. But so we're like there, and we're like the Phoenix teacher. Not the current Phoenix teacher. It was a different one. She left. But she's like, okay, guys, we're going to split up into two different groups. Men over here and women over here. And I'm like, no. But no. And then she's like, well, why don't you just go with the one that you most identify with? And I'm like, ma'am, please. Because it's like, I don't identify with either of them.
Right.
So it's like, you want me to make my own line? Boom, I win. I won the competition, give me a prize.
Absolutely.
Yeah. She never acknowledged that. And she kind of just looked at me when I said that and then walked away.
Oh, I bet she has not forgotten that though, Sam. I bet that is in her brain hopefully as a moment that she realized, oh, that was I really ostracized someone there. Yeah.
I think microaggressions are really weird to me because I experience a lot of them in like stereotypes, right? And so people just are like, I think the biggest one that I get I would consider microaggression just because of the sort of like ignorance and lack of changing after I've called it out, right? Is the amount of times that people call me a twink, right? And it's like, well, technically, sure, if you want to look up a dictionary and find it labeled, then maybe. But that's also an identity that people have. That's not a label that you get to put on me. It's a term of endearment for certain people. And it's one of those things that like, you tell somebody, hey, this is not something that I want you to refer to me as, or this is a stereotype about my identity that you seem to believe that is not true, and then they continue, and it's like, well, what was the point of that? What do you get out of your stereotype, right? And I think it's really interesting. And to Sam's point about teachers in school using very gendered language, we actually put together huge email with a lot of resources and sent it out to all the staff at Godoti. It was a very large team effort, yes, that the Godoti students did.
Was that last year? Or like during your senior year?
Yeah, I believe it was.
Because I think I saw that and I was like, oh my God, look at this
And
person. Look at you go, Max.
We sent it out, and you get one or two teachers to like start to adjust for a few weeks, and then it starts to die down, right? And the really interesting thing to me about that whole experience was we got responses from, out of the Godoti staff, there were 9 at the time, we got 7 emails back of staff just saying, thank you so much for this information. I even got some that wanted to like have a conversation about it. I got one that wanted more information about it, right? And they seemed very eager, and they're like, please, information, me, please, I want to know. And then it kind of just died off.
Sure.
And it was just that, ramp up at the beginning, and then it died off. And so I think the biggest thing that I see, especially with microaggressions, is you call them out, and there's this temporary fix, and then they forget about it. And it's, what do we do in the they forgot about it stage? Because I'm only going to call you out once or twice, and then that's it. I have other people that I'll go hang out with, right? Like I am not in a place to just continue to call out this same thing over and over and over. It's not something I want to do.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a, the intent. I know people have good intent and they want to make the change, but if they start and do not continue, then they have put the work back on you, right? Like they are not, which is kind of the human condition. We know making change is hard, and we all fall off our plan of the great change that we want to make, whatever it is for ourselves. But that is one that I think after a certain amount of time, you kind of like lose your ally card if you're not actually committing to the changes that will evolve you to be a safe place.
Exactly. Because that's what makes an ally, right? Someone who's fighting to help, to be the change, to stop using microaggressions, to stop using gendered language. Like, that is the ally. The ally is not this person that says, sure, if you want to have gay marriage, fine. That's not an ally. That's someone that doesn't care about...
You don't have a problem with it.
Exactly. That's the bare minimum. That's what I would expect everyone to do, which a lot of people don't, unfortunately. But that's not an ally. That's just a person who tolerates something. It's a person. But an ally is someone who's actively doing something.
Yeah.
And
there's no room for apathy if you want to be an ally, kind of, right? You actually have to be in action, in change of those things.
Exactly.
Yeah. We have to wrap up, but I have one last question that I want to ask. So imagine this hellscape. We're on a text thread with every single person in Nevada County.
Oh boy.
I know, right? I know. Out, block. But imagine we're on this magical text. This is where it gets good. We're on a magical text thread, and each of us get to put one request into the text thread.
Right before we leave.
Right before we bounce, yeah. And whatever we say, we're going to ask for one act of allyship from every Nevada County resident, and then we get to get out of the text thread. What would your one ask be? What is your call to action, Sam?
You have a phone? Use it. Stop posting on Twitter. Google is your friend. Fun fact. You can look up dictionary definitions, websites on there with lots of resources. Not Twitter, other places. Just come on, you have a phone. Please use it for what it was intended.
So as in like educating yourself?
Yeah,
kind
instead of like posting on Twitter about the gays and the trans and how they're transing your kids.
Yeah.
Maybe look it up. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is something every single time I'm speaking in front of people, this is the one message that I always give, and maybe one day it'll get old. I hope one day it gets old.
Right, absolutely.
But so far it has not, and that's use pronouns, right? When we all came up here, we introduced ourselves with our pronouns. When you meet someone new, you introduce yourself with your pronouns. It's, in my experience and personal opinion, the easiest way to be an ally, right? Because you start that conversation, and you're doing so many things when you use your pronouns, right? First, you're telling the person that you're talking to hey, I'm an ally, I'm a safe person. If you want to come out to me right now, if you want to be yourself around me, that's totally awesome. I'm here for that. That's what it does. Second, if you're talking to a cishet person, cisgender straight person, and you use your pronouns, you're now putting that into their head and getting them thinking about it, starting to, move the message forward, get the word out that we're using pronouns now, get people to start thinking about it, because I see so many people are homophobic, queerphobic, transphobic out of ignorance and out of a lack of a need to address the issue. And so if we start bringing the issue right to them, then they'll start having to think about it and start having to figure some stuff out. And so using your pronouns, I think, is the easiest and best way to start that conversation.
Absolutely. All places, all spaces. It's
Always.
always appropriate to share. Yeah. What about you?
I love that. Yeah, I just want to comment real quick on that. I mean, another benefit I was thinking is like for people who use they, them pronouns or the other neo pronouns as they're called, the newer, less conventional he or she, it normalizes, so it's not just the people who go by they, them who have to say, yeah, actually, can I please ask you to acknowledge my, identity, please? It just, if it's normal, I bet, and, if it's just normal to be like, yeah, he, him, she, her, and it certainly, yeah, I mean, I went many years before I was convincingly male, and, I would have to say he, him, and that way I wasn't the only one who's having to say, actually, yeah, I'm not just a short-haired girl, haha, So, yeah, I like that. That was a great piece of advice, to use pronouns. I don't know what I would say. I had all that time to think, and I'm still, and we had that question. That was one of the questions I didn't write notes for, because I was like, I'll just think of it on the spot. And I'm like, I don't know. Not really. I'm more just kind of like, oh, there's a cute little dog on my lap.
Everything's going to be okay.
I'd just be like, okay, all the queer people in Nevada County, let's get together with our dogs and have like a dog meetup. That's what I would do on the
Excellent. So Steven's ask would just be like, everyone at the dog park, 4 p.m.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay,
yeah,
we're going.
I love that.
I think that's a really important actually thing, because no, I'm serious. I think one of the things we see, we all got up here, we're like, hey, this is a very small, conservative, white, straight community. And technically, yes, it is, but there's so many people of so many diverse identities in this county. When you look at the numbers and when you start to figure it out, there's a lot of us. And if I think so many people just have a hard time finding that community, and so it's like, well, there's no one here. But once you find that community, you realize how many of us there are and how thriving the community really is. And so I think, yeah, a dog meetup is a great idea, to just find that community and to realize, hey, we have a huge community and we're actually here. We're not, just hiding.
Well said, Maddox. I think my my request into the thread would be to say, ditch the gendered greetings. You are definitely, if you interact with multiple people every day, you are definitely interacting with a queer individual, at least one, because we're everywhere and there's a lot of us here. And so, I really love folks and y'all. I think they're always appropriate and they sound lovely and charming, and we are in the country, so let's embrace that. That would be my request. And then I'd get the heck out of that chain text threads. Worst. Y'all, I want to I want to thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I feel so much hope knowing that that you, at much younger ages than me, are doing so much better than I was at your age. You're just you are such an important part of the vibrancy of our county, and I feel stoked to know you and stoked to learn alongside you. So thank you so much for this conversation and for all that you do.
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah. All right, now let's all head to the dog park. Thank you all also to our listeners.